Chapter 24. What Torin Planned.
Torin heard the news from old Sal Ramirez, who came in the evening to have the doctor look at his infected eye.
They've been ordered out.
Said Sal as Dr. Hester stood over him, pulling his eyelid down.
The cave people. They have to leave day after tomorrow. That can't be true,
said the doctor. She dipped a spoon into a small glass jar full of clear liquid.
Tip your head back,
she said. She dripped drops into Sal's eyes.
It's true,
said Sal.
Ben told them to go. But how can they?
Said the doctor.
There's no place for them to go. Oh, that's the doctor. There's no place for them to go. Some of them refused,
said Sal.
They said they'd fight.
He wiped his eyes.
Ben said he'd bring out the weapon if they did. The weapon?
The doctor set the jar down on the table and stared at Sal.
Has Ben gone out of his mind? Don't know,
said Sal. Torin listened from his place on the window seat, shivering with excitement. There was going to be a war right here in Sparks, and the terrible weapon would be used at last, on the cave people. He had always wanted to know what it was. Now he'd find out. Sal left with a bandage pressed to his eye. The doctor sat down at the table and stared out the window at the flame-colored streak in the western sky.
How have we come to this?
She said, but she didn't seem to be asking Torin. The look on her face caused a little fear to mix with Torin's excitement. He didn't want to be in the war, he thought. He could get hurt. The weapon might accidentally get him instead of the cave people. He just wanted to see the war, not fight in it.
Where will the war be?
He asked the doctor.
What?
She looked at him as if she'd forgotten he was there.
The war!
He said.
Day after tomorrow, where will it be? You're talking nonsense,
said the doctor.
If there's a war, it will be everywhere.
She stood up slowly, hoisting herself with an arm on the table. Her face looked heavy, and she shuffled to her room without saying goodnight. Torin went to bed and lay there a long time with his mind racing. He decided he would get up before anyone else the day after tomorrow, the day the war would begin. He would get dressed. He would take a hunk of cornbread from the kitchen and put it in his pocket. He would take a knife, too, in case the war came close to him. Then he would go down to the plaza and climb up to the top of the big pine tree, so high that he'd be hidden from below. From there, he would be able to see everything.
I'm just going to check to make sure it's still recording. Yep. Okay. I'll just edit that out. Chapter 25, Dread at the Last Minute.
As Pelton's truck drew near the village of Sparks, Lena was more and more impatient. She longed to see Poppy and Mrs. Murdo and Dune.
Another day's travel,
Pelton said.
We'll be in Sparks by tomorrow morning.
Lena was too excited to sleep much that night. Her mind galloped forward to the people she would see tomorrow and backward to everything she'd seen on her journey. She finally fell asleep a few hours before morning, and when she awoke, she could feel immediately that something in the air had changed. A wind had arisen, a warm, gusty wind that bent the brown glasses and rattled in the leaves of the trees. The blue of the skies had faded to a hazy gray, and the heat seemed more fiery than ever. She felt something unsettling in the air, a warning, like the first traces of fever when an illness is coming on.
Could be nearly 100 degrees today,
said Pelton.
But in a week or two, the heat will start to slack off. The season's changing. You can feel it in the wind.
They started out early. After only an hour or so, Lena could see the fields and buildings of Sparks in the distance. She stood up. She was sitting on the front seat of the truck between Maddie and Pelton, and shielded her eyes with her hand to see better. There it was, and now it looked like home to her. The solid little brown houses, the tidy fields around them. When they came to the road that led to the Pioneer Hotel, Lena had a sudden idea.
Let me off here,
she said.
I want to tell Dune I'm back. I'll walk the rest of the way.
She thanked Pelton for all his help, and he thanked her in return.
Take a few of the things you found,
he said.
Whatever you like.
She rummaged through the crate until she found the magnifying glass, the magnet, and the little red truck, and she tucked these into her pack.
I'll go into town and help Pelton with the trading,
Maddie said to Lena.
I'll meet you later at the doctor's house.
Lena jumped down from the truck, her legs strong and springy, her hair flying in the wind. She ran up the road toward the hotel. She expected to see people at the river, washing, and people sitting on the hotel steps eating their breakfasts, getting ready for work, but the grounds of the hotel were empty, and when she went inside, she found people milling about the lobby in confusion. Some of them were crying. She saw the two Hoover sisters, one wailing, the other one trying to comfort her, and she saw old Nammy Proggs sitting on the rolled-up blanket, grumbling to herself. People were arguing with each other. She heard angry voices and questioning voices and voices full of fear. For a second, she just stood looking, wondering what was happening. Then someone spotted her.
Lena!
A name rang out over the hubbub. Faces turned toward her, and people rushed to her and crowded around her.
You're back! Where have you been? We thought you disappeared forever!
She saw Clary's face, smiling, and she heard the voices of friends from school, and Captain Fleary and of the Ember Messengers, and someone who used to work in the shoe store.
Are you all right?
They said.
What a time to come back! Why did you leave? Where have you been?
Hands reached over her, arms wrapped her in hugs. She saw a red head bouncing up and down as Lizzie jumped in the air, trying to see over the crowd, and she saw Mrs. Polster beaming at her, and Miss Thorne at her side.
I'm fine,
She said.
I'm so happy to be back, but what's going on here, and where's Dune? I'm here!
It was Dune's voice. There he was, just coming down the stairs. She broke away from the welcoming crowd and ran over to him. He didn't speak, just reached out an arm and grabbed her hand. The look on his face, startled her. Was he angry?
Come outside,
He said. She followed him down a passage and out a door into the back of the hotel.
Mr. Hummel, we have a car on line 1, Mr. Hummel.
Welcome to school.
There was a small concrete terrace there, bordered by a low wall. Behind the wall, the drooping branches of a dusty tree stirred in the wind. Dune sat down on the wall and pulled her down next to him. For a moment, he said nothing. When he spoke, his voice came out in a rough shout.
Where have you been?
He said.
Don't you know how everyone was worried about you? Don't you know everyone has thought you were dead?
Lena shrank back.
I didn't mean to be gone so long.
She said.
It was a mistake. I thought... You've been gone nearly a month.
Dune said.
It was because of the city, Dune. I thought the city would be like those drawings I made. I thought maybe we could go there, all of us, and live there and be happy.
She finished weakly.
You could have told me you were going.
Dune said.
I might have wanted to go too. Didn't you think of that? I didn't really think at all.
Lena said.
I just saw the chance and went. But if I had thought about it...
She frowned, remembering.
I probably figured you didn't want to come because you were too busy with that tick.
Dune's face fell.
Oh.
He said.
Well, you're right. I guess I was. I thought Tick might be...
Dune stopped, looking flustered.
I'm sorry.
He said.
I'm sorry too.
Said Lena. They were silent for a moment, then Lena said,
Shall we forgive each other? All right.
Said Dune. He smiled. Lena smiled back.
But what's going on here?
She asked.
Why is everyone so upset? They've ordered us out, Lena. They've told us we have to leave tomorrow morning. What?
Lena could not take this in.
Who has to leave? All of us. All the people of Ember. And go where? Out into the empty lands. We have to make a new life for ourselves, they said. On our own.
Lena's mouth dropped open. A wild confusion filled her mind.
But how can we? What would we eat? Where would we live? And the frightening... Oh, wait, that's it.
Again, the frightening picture rose in her mind. The people of Ember scattered like fallen birds across a vast, dry landscape.
There are wolves out there.
She said.
And bandits. I know.
Said Dune.
And it will be winter soon. Have you heard of winter?
Lena shook her head. When Dune explained, her eyes widened in shock.
All this time you've been gone, Lena. They've done terrible things to us. The first thing was that boy Torin.
He told her about the smashed tomatoes that Torin blamed on him.
He said he saw you?
Lena said, outraged.
Why would he do that?
Dune shrugged.
Ask him, I don't know.
He went on to tell her what else had happened.
They've thrown us out of their houses. They've written hateful words on our walls. They've poisoned us with leaves. But why? What did we do to them?
Lena said. The wind blew her hair forward over her shoulders. She clutched a handful of tangled strands to hold them still.
We ate their food.
Said Dune.
That was the main thing. But other things happened too.
He told her about the riot in the plaza and about what happened in the fountain.
Now,
He said.
they've threatened to use their weapon on us if we don't leave. So Tick says we'll use our weapons on them. Our weapons? What weapons?
Dune sighed. For the first time, Lena noticed how thin he was. She saw the shadows beneath his eyes.
There's so much to tell you.
Dune said.
And we only have today. But I haven't even been home.
Lena said.
I have to see Poppy and Mrs. Murdo. Are they still at the doctor's? Is Poppy all right?
A scattering of dry leaves blew against her legs. The wind whipped her hair. The whole world had changed suddenly, just in the last half hour. Her throat tightened, and she felt tears threatening.
Yes, they're still at the doctor's.
Dune said.
Come on, I'll go with you. We'll talk there. Wait,
Said Lena.
I brought you a present. 2 presents.
She unrolled the pack she'd carried all the way from the city, took out the magnet and the magnifying glass, and handed them to Dune.
This one's a magnet, she said. Oh.
She said.
If you put it against metal, it sticks there. I guess it isn't very useful, but it's interesting. The other one is for making things bigger. I mean, making them look bigger. Thank you.
Dune said. He examined his presents curiously. He held the glass up and peered through it at the back of the hotel.
Look at something small,
Lena said.
like a leaf or a bug.
Dune rifled among the leaves on the ground and found an ant, which he set on the palm of his hand. Holding the glass above the ant, he looked through it.
Oh,
He said.
look! You can see its knee joints and even...
He trailed off, absorbed in looking. Then he raised his eyes to Lena.
It's a miracle!
He said. He blew the ant from his palm and looked around until he found a beetle.
Look at this!
He cried.
You can see it chewing!
He tried a feather and a bit of a moth wing and a blade of grass.
This is such an amazing world.
He said, finally putting the glass and the magnet into his pocket.
I love it here, except for the troubles with people.
Lena and Dune went through the village and up the road to the doctor's house. It was still early morning when they got there. When they came through the door, they saw everyone at the table eating breakfast. Mrs. Murdo was facing the door, so she saw them first. She stood up, her spoon still in her hand. She stared at her for a second. Her eyes round, her mouth open, words trying to come out of it. Then she rushed toward Lena and wrapped her in a hug. At the same time, Poppy jumped down from the bench, dashed toward Lena, and hugged her knees. The doctor stood up and watched his reunion wide-eyed. Torin leapt up too, but not to hug Lena. He ran to the door and looked out, and then he cried.
Where's Casper? Isn't he here too? Where is he?
But no one paid attention to him. They were too busy fussing over Lena, asking questions and not giving her a chance to answer.
Where have you been? Where are you all right? Why didn't you tell us? Do you know what's happening here?
Poppy yelled,
Lina, pick me up. Pick me up.
and the doctor, thrown into a state of even more confusion than usual, murmured,
Some tea? Or let's see, why don't we all... so glad you're...
and all around the edges was Torin, pulling at Lena's sleeve, saying,
But why isn't he here? Where is he? When is he coming?
and getting no answers. When things calmed down a little, Lena said,
Maddie will be coming soon. She stayed in town to help the roamer for a while.
Mrs. Murdo stopped smiling and grew stern.
Lena,
She said,
how could you go off like that and not talk to me first? And just leave that careless little note, which was not, I might point out, true. 3 days, you said. It's been 28. That was a thoughtless, foolish thing to do. I know.
Lena said.
I'm really, really sorry. I didn't know I'd be gone so long.
She explained how, when she overheard Casper, she thought he'd said,
A day's journey.
when really he'd said,
5 days' journey. And then
she said,
other things happened, and it took a long time. Yes?
said Mrs. Murdo.
And we had a long, long time to worry about you.
She picked up Lena's pack, which Lena had dropped on the floor, and sat in the window seat.
And you know what's happened here? You know we've been ordered to leave tomorrow? I know,
Lena said,
but I can't believe it's true. It's true.
said Mrs. Murdo.
It doesn't please me a bit, but What to do about it? I don't know. Come and have some breakfast.
Lena and Dune sat down at the table where the others had been eating raspberries and cream. Though Lena was not thoroughly sick of travelers' cakes that all the real food should have looked good to her, she had no appetite. Her stomach was in a knot.
I can't eat.
She said.
I'm not hungry. Dune and I have to talk. At least take an apple.
Said Mrs. Murdo.
The doctor. First of the season.
The doctor added.
From up north.
Lena took the hard red fruit and she and Dune went outside. The heat was baking down. They went through the courtyard where the doctor's plant pots were mostly empty, the plants having been either put in the ground or died. The ones still there struggled in the heat, limp or brown. They crossed the road and walked down to the riverbank. Even the river was suffering in the heat. It no longer flowed deep and smooth, but ran in streams between the exposed stones. Its edges were yellow-green and smelly. They sat on the ground. Lena said,
It would take me hours to tell you everything I've seen. But listen, this is the main thing. People had a beautiful city, and they wrecked it. On purpose?
Said Dune.
With wars, with fighting. It was horrible, Dune.
She shuddered, remembering.
That war, it sort of whispered to me. There was a moment when I could hear screams. I could see flames. And there's nothing left. Almost nothing. And all across the empty lands, are there houses? Some, but they're old and falling down. Mostly it's fields and fields of brown grass. There's howling animals. If we had to go out there and try to live, well, we couldn't. That's why a lot of people want to fight.
Dune told her about Tick and the weapons he and his warriors had gathered. He explained the plan, how they would go into the village tomorrow, refusing to leave, prepared to fight, and he told her about the terrible weapon the town leaders had threatened to use.
Yes,
Lena said.
I've heard about the weapon too. Torn mentioned it one time, but what is it? We don't know.
Dune said.
If it's from the old times,
Lena said,
then it's so terrible that Tick's little weapons would be like twigs against it. The old weapons could burn whole cities.
She clasped her arms around her stomach and bent forward. Everything inside her felt cramped, knotted up. Her hands were slick with sweat.
There can't be a war,
she said.
But we can't leave either,
said Dune. They sat watching the water struggle along between the rocks. The sun blazed down, burning the backs of their necks.
Do you think,
said Dune,
that fighting would be better than just giving in? At least it's doing something. I don't know,
said Lena.
It scares me.
She ran her finger over the glossy red skin of the apple Mrs. Murdo had given her.
I talked a lot to Maddie on my journey,
she said at last.
She's wise, Dune. She told me how war gets started. It's when people say, you hurt me, so I'll hurt you back. But that's just how people are,
said Dune.
Of course, when people hurt you, you want to get back at them. And then they want to get back at you. And then you want to get back at them again, only worse. It goes on and on unless someone stops it. Stops it how? You have to catch it soon, Maddie said. As soon as you see it starting, you have to stop it. Otherwise, it can be too late. But how do you stop it? You have to reverse the direction,
said Lena.
That's what Maddie told me. She said that if someone had been brave enough, the wars might not have started in the first place. But Lena...
Dune slapped his hand down on the ground next to him.
What does that mean? How do you do it?
Lena wasn't entirely clear about this. She took a bite of the red fruit the doctor had handed her. It looked as hard as a polished stone, but the juice that burst into her mouth was sweet.
I think it's this,
she said. She chewed and swallowed.
Instead of getting back at the other side with something just as bad as they did to you, or something worse, you do something good. Or at least you keep yourself from doing something bad.
She took another bite of the apple.
I think that's it. One bad thing after another leads to worse things. So you do a good thing, and that turns it around.
Dune sighed.
That's not very helpful,
he said.
How are we supposed to do something good for these people who have done so many bad things to us? Why would we even want to? Well, that's it,
said Lena, wiping apple juice off her chin.
You don't want to, but you do it anyway. That's what makes it hard. Maddie said it was very hard. It's much harder to be good than bad, she said. So what do we do then?
Said Dune. His tone was bitter.
Say we'll be happy to work without food? Say we'll always be nice no matter what they do to us? No.
Said Lena.
That can't be right. Or should we just go quietly out into the empty lands and not bother them anymore? No.
Said Lena.
That can't be right either.
She stared at the water rippling by. She was thinking hard.
We don't want to leave.
She said.
And we don't want to fight. Do you think those are the only two choices? Well, what else could there be? If we don't fight, they'll make us leave. If we don't leave, we'll have to fight.
Lena discovered a tough part in the center of the apple, surrounding some brown seeds. She picked at the seeds with her fingernail.
There must be some other way,
she said.
What if we all just sit down in front of the hotel and refuse to move? We don't leave, but we don't fight. They wouldn't use their weapon on us if we weren't fighting, would they? I don't know.
Said Dune.
They might. I don't think they would.
Lena said.
They're not bad people. But we couldn't sit there forever.
Dune said.
Sooner or later, they'd make us leave. They'd pick us all up one by one and load us onto trucks and drive us away. Well, maybe they wouldn't.
Said Lena.
Maybe we could talk and work something out. I don't think so.
Said Dune.
Tick and his warriors would never just sit. They want to fight.
Lena drew up her knees and rested her chin on them. Something good, she thought. What good act would turn things around?
We could volunteer to be roamers.
She said.
A whole lot of us. So they wouldn't have to feed us, and we could bring things back to them. We don't know how to be roamers.
Said Dune.
We don't have trucks or oxen. We wouldn't know where to go. We could say we'll do all the worst jobs.
Lena said.
But that wouldn't be fair.
Said Dune, impatiently.
Why should we? That's no good.
He stood up, slapping the dry grass from his pants.
I think it's too late for any of that. None of it's gonna work.
Lena stayed where she was, still thinking. She desperately wanted to find an answer, but no answer came to her. Her spirit sank and she suddenly felt tired.
Well then, we'll just have to be on the lookout.
She said.
Some chance might turn up. We have to watch for it. I don't know what else to do.
She knew how weak and silly this sounded, but to her surprise, Dune smiled a little.
That's like what my father told me when I was working in the pipeworks. Pay attention,
he said. It was a good
that was his
idea
main
then.
thing.
Oh, it sure is.
Pay attention, he said. It was a good idea then. I suppose it still is. Anyway, I guess it's the best we can do.
Lena dropped her apple core on the ground and scuffed some dirt over it, and they trudged back to the doctor's house. Dune stayed there for lunch instead of going to the Partons, and then he headed back to the hotel. Lena meant to spend the rest of the day thinking as hard as she could about the choices she'd have to make tomorrow. She sat on the window seat, sideways, her legs stretched out, and she tried to keep her mind to produce ideas. But she kept coming up against the two walls. Fight. She didn't want to fight. Or leave. She didn't want to leave. A slow fly buzzed against the window. Wind stirred in the grape leaves outside. Think, thought Lena. Pay attention. And then she fell asleep.
All right, people. We are clearly at a bit of a turning point in the book right now. The decision that Dune needs to make. What are the people of Sparks going to do? Are they going to fight? Are they going to sit back and let whatever happens? Are they going to leave? We're clearly at an important part of the book. I'm really interested to see what your slides will look like. Once again, this week, I would like you to create 2 posts. Again, you can choose TikTok or Instagram. I have those templates for you on Google Classroom if you'd like to copy them or draw them out, whatever you want. Same thing. 2 posts. You can do it from the perspective of anybody. You could do it from Dune's perspective. He's a main character right now for sure. Or you could do it from Tick's perspective. You could do it from Lena's perspective. And again, you can choose one of those posts. You could do the main event, which we are called status update. an important part of the chapter. Remember, you're writing down a really good explanation what's going through that character's mind. You could do a Throwback Thursday if you have a connection to something that happened in this chapter. And again, a nice explanation for that. You can do the Fortune Teller, which is a prediction, or you can do a meme if you're questioning, wondering. Again, every single one of those you need to have a nice detailed explanation about your post. That's your job. Looking forward to the next chapter. It's coming soon.